Hello everyone, Ashley here with a very important announcement. Beginning on August 29th, 2023, the Stitcher app and website will end its operations. What does that mean for you? Well, unfortunately, it means that you will no longer be able to access your shows, your downloads, preferences, or listening history. It's gone. Kaput. Finito. That means you can't even listen to us, and we can't even put anything on the Stitcher app. However, you will be able to continue listening to Ham Radio, Stranger Things podcast, as well as your other favorite podcasts on every major listening platform such as Google, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, uh, all the majors, Spotify. Yeah, I can't believe I forgot about that. Spotify. Basically any app on the internet you will be able to access to listen to ham radio or your other favorite podcasts, but you can't do it on Stitcher after August 29th. So again, August 29th, the Stitcher app is going away, and so will its website. Thank you so much, and I'm sorry I had to bring you that very depressing news. I'm Ashley.
And I'm Jasmin.
And you're tuned into Ham Radio Stranger Things Podcast.
It's a ham radio.
The Cadillac of ham radios.
And welcome everyone back to yet another episode of the Ham Radio Podcast. Today, Jasmin and I, along with a very special guest, Robin Farrell, will be presenting our favorite Stranger Things scenes and or moments from beginning from season 1 all the way up to the recent season 4. And we'll even be sharing some of our least favorite scenes because, let's be real, not every TV series is perfect, and that includes Stranger Things. But first, we have a little housekeeping to take care of, and I'm going to turn it over to Jasmin to let you guys know where you can find us on the socials and where you can listen to the podcast. Jasmin?
Yeah, so absolutely. So as always, you can find us on Instagram at ham.radio.media, on Twitter at hamthrough, on YouTube at Ham Radio Media or Ham Radio 1983. That's our handle. We also have a Discord. The link will be in the episode description. You can also email us at hamradiomedia@gmail.com. Ashley has a fanfic on AO3, which will also be linked in the episode description. And the podcast is available on all major podcasting platforms, Apple, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, etc. Please consider leaving us a review and a rating. We will have totally tubular stuff coming up, so please follow us on our socials to keep up with the podcast, all of our new content.
Yes, that is correct. Thank you, Jasmin.
Ashley, what were some of your favorites from this season?
Yeah, so they're none of yours. Like completely different from anything that either of you had. But yeah, mine are 11 when she closes the gate. Super awesome scene. You know, it's kind of funny. I think about in season 4 when Dr. Brenner's like, you need to learn how to fly, and it's like, well, technically she already has in season 2 because she literally lifted herself up, but of course he doesn't know that. And then the snowball scene, like the entire scene, including at the end when the camera turns upside down, we see the mind flare and the upside down looking over the school with Every Breath You Take about the police playing in the background. Love that. I love when Max scares the boys on Halloween and Lucas's girl scream. That was absolutely hilarious. And she's like, and you, who screams like that? I love that. Then I like the scene in the junkyard when all the demo dogs are out. I like it when, Steve, realizes, what's going on. It's like something's calling them. I thought it was a good moment, for Steve to be the one to realize that. But I also just love the creepiness of it, of like the connections and everything, with the hive mind and stuff there. And then finally, I like it, when Nancy was drunk at the Halloween party and she's just like, everything is bullshit, just like the
Oh,
way she says it. And I listened to a podcast it's called the um Star Court Study Hall podcast. They're like hilarious on that show, and when they did their season 2 recap, they every time they would do like Nancy, one of them would go like, mocking her like that, you know, bullshit. It was just hilarious because like Nancy, terrible drunk. But I just, I love that. Not that that was like Nancy's greatest moment in my opinion in season 2, but it's definitely a funny moment for me. So that's like,
oh, it's
um,
that's funny because that scene is heartbreaking to me. I love her performance because it's so hard to play drunk well. So I've always been very much in awe of like how of both of their performances in that scene. In addition to the fact that that bathroom is tiny, so how they were able to film in that space.
So tiny.
Yeah, so I'm really impressed with the camera work in that sequence as well. But like, it's really now prior to season 4, I liked how that ended up being. I guess I still feel this way, but like that being kind of the moment that they split. I That's really where to me they fully split because and I like that it happens actually, but I find that and I say heartbreaking in like a like I mean that like that's what they're trying to do to me. That's their intention, and then they succeed with it. Like just because, I mean, to me, Kiri plays that like he looks like he's gonna cry. I love that
Yeah.
scene. That scene's great.
It's so hard to watch, but it's so great. And this is something I've pointed out before, but I didn't notice it until somebody gifted this and made the comment. But when after Steve leaves, Nancy's, moving the towel, she actually makes the middle finger with her hand as she's moving it, and it's reflected back in the mirror. So there's such attention to detail with that scene. And you're right, like it's hard to play drunk well, and it's heartbreaking. But I also love that you got the two different perspectives. Like they pick up on totally different things that scene. Like Nancy's point is like, you want us to forget everything and be drunk teenagers and have fun, but we killed Barb. I can't let go of the guilt. I can't communicate about this. I'm drowning. And what Steve picks up on is, you don't love me like we're in love. They're on two completely different perspectives of what's happening. And it's such a raw scene, and it's such a like, oh.
Well, just it's so indicative of that they are just I like the progression of that episode in particular too, because of how where it starts in episode 1 with them in the car, and how like the stuff about the essay, like it's just the beginning of this season really shows how at least at this stage in their lives, how just they're really not compatible, and that like that's not either one, and that there's a lack of communication happening on both sides, and how they're just not well suited at that point, and how and that's not really to either of their faults. And I like the subtlety of how it's written, and that like even though it's about them like falling apart as a couple, I really appreciate how it's all constructed, and how the descent of their relationship and eventually their breakup, like I really appreciate that. Like how it just felt like there was a lot of thought put into that, and maybe it wasn't, but I like the result a lot. So yeah, good choice, Ashley.
Thank you. No, yeah, I definitely agree. Like, on one hand, I felt kind of bad for Steve in that moment because, he did look like he was about to cry. But the other hand, they were just on very different, worlds at that point in time, because obviously Steve really didn't seem to care about what happened to Barb. He seemed to have moved on from that. But Nancy, still can't let it go because, I mean, and rightfully so, like, Barb was her friend, not Steve's. And in a way, it's really more, in terms of if we're going to put blame, I mean, I don't really think it was actually either Steve or Nancy's fault, really, that Barb died, because they didn't know she was going to stay and wait for Nancy. And that was, Barb's choice because she, cared about Nancy and was her friend and all. And I think if seriously, if Barb hadn't cut her hand, she probably would still be with us to this day. But, the Demogorgon smelled the blood, like a shark, he came and, attacked. But yeah, I think in that moment, you just really realize that these, people that are on, very two different wavelengths at that point, I can see why they broke up.
Yeah, 100%.
So, who wants to start off with the season 3 scenes?
I can keep starting us off if you want.
Yeah, sure. No problem.
Yeah,
Go
go
ahead.
So I will say that season 3 and I have a very contentious relationship. However, I mean the number one scene on my list for season 3 is actually my favorite scene in the entire series. And that is Steve and Robin, their bathroom scene when she comes out.
too. That's my top scene for this season.
That scene changed my life, actually. I'm not going to get into the full story here because it's very long and involved, but if any listeners are like, what? We get into it in depth over on Coffee and Contemplation, but the short version is that this scene hit me in a way that I did not expect it to, and it made me self-aware, ironically not because of Robin, but because of Steve. It was the moment it was through this scene that I realized that, oh, like my journey with the character kind of came to fruition, which I realized that, oh, I see a lot of myself in Steve, and I had not been aware of that. So that was a hard scene for me to watch the first time through, but it's always been very impactful, both like in context, it's some of the best writing in the entire series, and I maintain that to me that is the show at its finest, in that it's trusting its actors and it's leaning into its characterization, and it's trusting that we don't, because that's one of the longest, like it reminds me actually a little bit, since we're talking about all the seasons, it actually I feel like has a little bit in common with that scene between Joyce and Hopper in season 2. It's so character driven. And even Joe Keery said, like, in the interview that he did with GQ a while back, that, like, he was like, we don't normally get this long to just talk to one another. So the fact that they let that scene breathe and have that space, it's so beautifully handled. And I adore those two characters. I adore that dynamic. I love that friendship so much. Don't get me wrong. I was very much hoping they were going to be a couple. Because
me too. Me too. I still thought that's where they were going.
I mean, my favorite character was Steve up until this point. I knew that, but like, it would have been really cool to have one of my favorite characters dating somebody with my name. But I cannot be more. I could not be happier with the relationship that these two characters have. It's perfect for what Steve's character development needs, in terms of like what something I did say in that episode when over on Coffee and Contemplation was that this is a really good example of want versus need in storytelling, where you have to give your characters have wants, but ultimately they have the needs that their actual needs end up being can end up being very different from what they want. And this is a great example. It's like, it's perfect. What he wants is a girlfriend. What he needs is a friend, and someone his own age, someone who's at the same stage in life that he is, or at least closer to it. And it's fantastic. It's my favorite scene in the entire series, including season 4. Like, it's beautiful. Like I said, life-changing. So I love it. That's like number 1, like with a bullet. But the other, I don't have as many for season 3 because it's my least favorite season. But
yeah, I'm with you. It's my least favorite season too.
Which is weird considering it has my favorite scene in the entire series.
It's one of those though. Like, there's moments that I absolutely adore and dynamics I absolutely adore. The other stuff where I'm like, I could not get into this, or I'm like, what were they doing?
But my second pick was Elle versus Billy Flair in the sauna test. That sequence is fan-frickin-tastic. I love it. I also I adore the scene between Dustin and Erica in the air vents with the "You are a nerd." I love it. I love that so much. It was in that scene that I realized whoever you pair Gaten Matarazzo with, it's gonna work. Like, and it
Yeah.
continues to be true in season 4. Like, anyone you pair him with, it works. Like, and I I remember like that, and that is one point in season 3's favor. I think we get more screen time with Erica in season 3 than we do in season 4. So hoping we get more of her in season 5. But yeah, I just love that. And I love the whole thing of like that Dustin knows My Little Pony. It's great. It's so good. And I say that like unironically, like I love that they did that. And then my last choice was the shopping montage between Elle and Max, the Material Girl sequence, because I think that has a lot of, I think it's easy to read that scene as being very superficial, but I actually think there's a lot of really, really important character stuff happening in that prior to the I dump your ass bit. All just Max and Elle together, the quote unquote makeover section of it. I really, really like that. I think that's really important, really valuable.
Yeah, me too. I think we overlap quite a bit on this season. My top one is also Robin's coming out scene in the bathroom. I agree with, everything you said. I can see why it would be life changing because it was so well done, and it was unexpected. I think I appreciate it more on rewatch because when first time I saw that scene, watching it for the first time, I was like, oh, look, the original plan was that Robin was supposed to be Steve's new love interest, so they were going that direction. You really thought it was going there. I really wanted that for both those characters, and then realizing, oh, that's not the case. It was a bit jarring, and I kind of walked away from the first time being like, oh man, now I feel bad for both characters because what they really want is to find love and they can't, and that really sucks. But then upon rewatch, I've really come to appreciate how wonderful that scene is, especially since when you get to season 4, it then builds into them both supporting each other as they pursue relationships with other people and having this really wonderful friendship. So I love, even though we didn't get that, it's evolved into this really beautiful thing that in some ways I think is more meaningful than it would have been if they'd gone the romantic route. So I just adore that scene.
I also
It's
love
so done.
I also just really love that, and this probably I should wait until we get into season 4 stuff, but I love the fact that Joe Keery and Maya Hawke seem to be like actually buds in real life. Like
Yeah.
that makes me so happy.
Yeah, and I love that you get that sense of like that the actors are genuinely close in real life. I feel like that really comes through in seasons 3 and 4 in particular, that in season you really get the sense that they are genuinely close. And then very different scene, but the scene on the couch in season 4 when they're being interrogated as to why they were down at the lake with Max, Lucas, and Dustin. The fact that they were all Broadway babies and knew each other prior to being cast. So they've been friends for years. That really comes through. The way people interact when you've known somebody that long really comes through, and you're really genuinely close to them. Even the way they're trying to signal Erica, like that came across very much like very old friends or siblings being like, seriously, shut up. Like I love that. And I love the moments where that really comes across strongly. And you're right. It like when Steve makes the decision to, be the best version of himself and make her laugh and let her know it's okay. That scene where they're like peeing their pants laughing about how
And then
Tammy Thompson sounds like a Muppet.
Yeah. But that I also appreciate that it's not immediate. They have him take a minute. They allow him to sit with it. Like that feels so believable to me. That it's not like if it had been instantaneous, I don't think it would have worked as well. But the fact that they have him sit with it for a moment, and it's like they allow him to take the moment to be disappointed for one thing, but also like, okay, this is what are you gonna do with it? And then he makes the choice. I just the subtlety of that is really effective.
Yeah, I agree. And you can see, at least for me, you can see the cogs turning in Steve's head. You can see him considering his options, how he wants to handle this, take in this new information, how he could approach it. He has a few different options there. And they're alone in a bathroom after being drugged by Russians. Like no one else is going to know about how he reacts. And I love that they gave him that space to think through his options and go, and make the active choice to be like, this is disappointing, but everything I said is still true. I really love spending time with this person. So, okay, I'm not getting a girlfriend out of this, but I can make the choice to be cool and make her laugh and let her know it's okay. And then I'm still here for her, and I can get a real friend out of this, which he desperately needs. And I love that they showed, you're right, in such a subtle way, him making that active choice, which is such a far cry from who he was in season 1 or even season 2. Just he was so reactionary in his decision making. I mean, also he's a teenage boy. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
But I love that his evolution there is for him. I love that he gets more moments where you see him actively thinking about his choices, and that's how he chooses to approach it.
Yeah.
Is so wonderful. And
the button on the end of it too. Justin and Erica. Okay, what the hell?
That's so funny. Yeah. They're having this like meaningful moment and they burst in. They're like, seriously, what the hell? They've been looking everywhere for that.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if them cracking up was candid. Like after he says that, like if maybe there was supposed to be something else scripted there, but Carrie and Hawk just kept laughing because it's great.
Yeah, and I've read interviews where this is part of season 4, but like where the actors always want to swear. And there have been comments where Joe Keery's like, hey, can I swear here? And they're like, no, we're saving that for like Dustin or one of the kids because it's funnier if they do. And they only have so many because of the previous rating. I think it was like PG or whatever it was. Or whatever was rated. And how like the rating went up for season 4 and everyone freaked out. And I'm like, I don't think, and I was right. People were like, oh no, it went up to mature or whatever. Like, oh my God, it's going to be all this stuff. It's going to be so much darker, blah, blah. It wasn't. It just meant they could swear.
Right.
Like,
right.
And that to me was very obvious. I'm like, they're not kids anymore, literally. So they're upping the rating, and that's all it meant. But I agree. Like, there's many moments in season 3 where I'm like, yeah, there might have been something else there, but they just couldn't stop laughing.
Yeah,
because it's getting on his line delivery is so fantastic.
Marazzo, man, VIP, man.
Oh man, so great. So that's my top scene. And then second to that, I have also something that you had, which is Max and Elle at the mall. And like you said, I think you can read that as very superficial, but I agree. I think it's more meaningful than that. I love the song choice. I love how it's played out. I love that Max, with like very little understanding of what Elle has been through or the situation, because she doesn't know her that well, is immediately very, very supportive. Like, Ella's freaked out about so many people, colors, choices. It's very overwhelming for her. And Max is very supportive, and it's like, it's going to be okay. You have powers. Let's just go see, like kind of pulls her out of her shell. But it's also like is validating that this is an overwhelming experience for her. I love that. I love the scene where I was like, how do I know what I like? Because she's like, not Hopper, not like you. And she goes, well, you just try things on until you feel something that feels like you. And she goes, feels like me? She goes, feels like you. And I love that she supports her on that, and she realizes that Elle's never had this before, and she makes it her mission to help her. And I also love, I've seen other people comment on this, but the fact that Max, she's very much a tomboy, but Elle is not, and that a lot of times in media you have this whole like, I'm better than you because you're a girly girl and I'm a tomboy. And I love that they don't do that with these characters, that Max has got her style and her thing going on, but she is 100% supportive of Elle finding her own style, which is very different from Max's. And it doesn't have to be a competition. I think a lot of times in media, it's getting better, but I mean, there was time in 2000s where there was whole movies and the entire plot was women in a stupid competition pitted against each other that made no sense.
Yep.
And I love that we're moving away from that. And I love that you really see that here, that, Max just wants to like have a good time with her newfound bestie and go to the mall and have some fun. And I love the scene where the cool girls are like doing that whole like just looking at them with disdain, and they burst out laughing when they're trying on the high heels. And it reminds me of a quote that there's from a YouTuber I watch. They talk about, it's very weird to me that to be cool, you have to pretend you don't like things, or that be mean to people or look down on people for liking stuff too much. And what a bizarre concept that is in our society, that like people are mean to, it's not the same thing they used to be, but for a long time, the whole thing about being mean to nerds, that nerds were losers, is like, you like things too much. It's cool to not care, which is so stupid. Like, whatever you believe, this one particular life that we have will only pass once. You're gonna spend your time pretending you don't like stuff you really like or being mean to people who are really enthusiastic about things. Like, how dumb is that? But this was definitely a time period where like that was very much the case. And so I love that they just kind of laugh it off and they're like, we're having a good time. Who cares what these random girls think? I just, yeah, I just love
Absolutely.
that. And
Mhm.
the scene also with the sunglasses, with Max with the sunglasses, like so cool. And that also leading, as much as I love Mike and Levin's relationship, Max very much empowers Elle to make her own choices outside of the men in her life, which she's never had before. And I don't think Micah and Hopper are intentionally trying to box her in. I just don't think they realize they're doing it. And I love that Max is so supportive of make your own choices, you deserve better. And that ultimately that's why she dumps Mike, is that she's like, you lied to me, like, and I love that, we see that this is someone who's very much supporting her to be like, and we see that throughout season 3, that, Max is very supportive of Elle making her own choices and that she's her own person. She's not a pet. She's not, something for you to control. She's a human being, and whether she understands or not, she has the right, the bodily autonomy and the right to make her own choices. And I love that Max is really the first person in Elle's life to just be like, no, like, what do you want to do? What do you like? Figure out what you want. So I love that. And I think that separation is really felt in season 4. It's so heartbreaking, at the end there. So I hope we're going to see a return to that towards the end of season 5. And then for this season, I think my favorite plot, it's kind of weird. So my favorite plot/dynamic is Robin and Steve at Scoops Ahoy, like their banter that we see and their kind of relationship when they're trying to crack the code, and we kind of establish how things have been going during the summer while Dustin's been off at summer camp, and then that plus the Scoops Troop banter and dynamic. Even though I didn't like the Russia plot in terms of like the Russians in that plot and that whole setup, I just thought it was absurd. But I love the kind of banter and the Scoop Troop dynamic that comes out of it and what we see with Robin and how, Steve is so proud of her and she's, how and he validates, right? I think what I keep coming back to is good characters and good friends in real life are people that validate when you do something great or when you're proud or happy of something, or they build you up, right? Good friends build you up. They're like, they're proud of you, they're there for you, they also defend you to other people, like, and we see Steve and Max do that really strongly this season. So I loved seeing their dynamic in season 4 and him being that older brother figure that she's always wanted and couldn't get ever with Billy. There's lots of things I don't like about this season, but those things are very, very strong for me. So Ashley, do you want to get into your favorite moments? I know that you have a soft spot and a particular love for this season. So I'd love to hear your top moments.
Yeah, so it's no secret that season 3 is my favorite season of the show. It probably always will be. I think it's because of, that was like first time like I ever watched new episodes of the show, and and it was a time in my life, there's just always things that I feel, that takes me back to, the good old days whenever I watched season 3. So it was definitely hard for me to not put like 100 scenes from season 3 in mind. But yeah, I'm with Robin. I like 11 versus a flayed Billy in the sauna. That's probably my favorite scene of the whole entire series. Like, it's just the way it's shot and everything, and the performances from Millie Bobby Brown and Dacre Montgomery, just so awesome. I love it every time I watch it. I also like when a flayed Billy sees 11 when she's, goes into his memories, and he's like, you shouldn't have looked for me because now we see you, now we all see you. Like,
Yeah.
season 3 for me is, when I watched it, I kind of had started putting the pieces together that maybe there was a human being maybe behind a lot of the stuff going on, and this moment here really cemented that for me.
Mm.
As it's not just a shadowy figure anymore. that's taking precedence here. But yeah, I definitely love it because it's creepy and you're like, oh my gosh, you don't know what's going to happen to her in that moment.
Music.
Or
Music in that
exactly,
moment? Yeah.
yes, and him, putting the cigarette out and stuff. It's just so well done, and I love it so much. And then I had at the beginning of season 3 in episode 1, um, when they all surprise Dustin when he gets home and he turns around and sprays Lucas in the eyes with the can of hairspray. It's hilarious. And then I like the hospital sequence with Nancy and Jonathan going up against Bruce and Tom. Like Jonathan, that's probably the best scene that Jonathan has in this series. If I'm being honest, because he takes that chair to the back like a champ. Okay, Steve's never done that. That's all I'm gonna say on that. So,
Oh, that's
but
fair. He gets pounded into a
yeah,
pulp by
and like
Russians.
yeah, but Jonathan's spinal cord should be severed, and or at least
Season 3 plays very fast and loose with bodily injury. I'll just say
yeah,
that.
and it makes me
Yeah.
cringe like seeing it happen, and I feel the pain, and yet I still watch it anyway because it's so good. And then like when Nancy hits Bruce in the head and he goes owie, like it's just it's good stuff. And I'm usually not one for horror like that or anything like that, but I loved the way they it was directed and the way it was edited and all that. It's just a good action packed scene. And then I like all the Max and 11 scenes. It's really good friendship, and especially now that we didn't see them really happen for most of season 4, and when we finally did, it wasn't a happy occasion. And lastly, I have Hopper's letter at the end, which I
Oh,
sometimes skip.
heartbreaking
Yeah,
that we've had.
like sometimes I can't even watch it because it's so moving and sad, and it's a really weird scene in that it feels like a series finale. And you can make the argument that the series could have ended with that. And that's one of the reasons that I don't really like how they faked his death and how everything happened with the Russian plot in season 4, because you send him off with such a beautiful moment in season 3, and now it's for nothing seemingly. And
Yeah.
to me, it's like I know Robin has said this on Coffee Contemplation with the when it's cold I like to die moment in season 1. It's like it feels like that. It feels kind of like it's cheapened this beautiful moment from Hopper and the way they did it, and I can't look at it ever the same way again. And I kind of wish, not that I want Hopper to actually be dead, but I kind of wish that they might as well have just kept him dead, because it it just makes that moment so much more beautiful, and really adds so much more to his character, and it really brings out like a lot of character growth within him to learn, why he's been the way he's been. But now that 11's in his life, he's living again. So that's why I really um enjoy that tearjerker. And yeah, so I'm gonna stop for all my scenes for season 3 there, because I don't want to keep you guys here all night. But yeah, those are my favorite scenes from season 3.
I will say the ending of season 3 is so incredibly sad. Like I've said this before, but I read something in the wiki. It's now been updated, but it was something I didn't remember. So I went back to watch the end of season 3, and it turns out that whoever's writing the wiki was mistaken. Because I'm like, I don't remember that, and it wasn't there. But I went back and watched basically the end scene where Joyce hits the key, turns the key, and from there to the end of season 3. And I'd forgotten how incredibly sad that is. Like the scene where Elle comes out, they realize Hopper isn't there. Mike hugging his mom, the letter, the buyer's packing up. The whole thing is like it hits you right in the gut. I think because I'd watched seasons 1 to back. We binged them, my friend and and then you go back and watch something like, oh my God, it hits so incredibly hard, and then everyone's like leaving and biking home, and Mike goes and hugs his mom. It's like the whole thing just it just hits you so hard.
Yeah, totally. It's the whole thing is just really sad. And we got the music in the background, and Eleven's crying, and just hearing Hopper talk, especially when he talks about, I miss coming home and us, eating Eggos together and watching Miami Vice together and playing board games and stuff. And too, it also, for me, it always makes me think of, my own life of, you know, fun times with my friends and family from years past, and how, you're never going to get those moments back. But at the same time, like, I miss doing that stuff. And now, I don't. And I wish that I could still be doing that stuff, but you can't, because life is always changing. You can't stay in one place in your life forever.
I can't watch that scene. It's not because it's one that I probably won't watch again for a very long time. It's not because it's badly done. It's actually very well done. At the time that I watched it when season 3 first aired, I was a little bit irritated because I feel like one of the reasons that I don't like season 3 much is because I feel like their characterization of Hopper through the majority of it is wildly off. But then at the end, there are like these few moments through the season where you get what feels like the Hopper we've known, and then at the end, that's one of them. But now, I mean, my father passed away in 2020, so, and I wasn't there. I wasn't able to be there because it was right at the start of lockdown. So for me, that scene just hits a little too close to home. So I can't comment on it really any very recently because I haven't watched it pretty much since we covered it for season 3. But I will or on our podcast. But yeah, I probably won't go back to it.
Oh, that's so awful. I'm so sorry. That would be so
I mean,
hard.
again, though, not because it's not well done, it's because it's too well done.
It's like it's too well done. That's why it
Yeah,
hits you so
yeah.
Yeah.
hard.
That's why I struggle to watch it. And like I said, I sometimes I skip it because I can't, like, if I really need a good cry, it's good for that. But
Mm-hmm.
most of the time I can't watch it because it still makes me cry. I feel like, that's how it's gonna be at the end of season 5, because it's over,
Yeah.
but also, it's gonna be very emotional.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and just to touch on what you were talking about, Robin, not the same, but my grandfather passed away. So the first year of like the pandemic, and
Mm-hmm.
like I wasn't able to be there either.
Yeah.
And I mean I wasn't particularly close to my grandfather,
Mm.
but and it does sound like you were close to your dad, so it's not the same. But I know that feeling you're talking about where my family, the rest of my family was able to be there because they lived either in the same city as my grandfather or close enough that it was safe for them to, like, it was a short car ride, but I'm 7 hours away, so there was no way for me to, like, normally I take the train where you just couldn't. This was like the summer of 2020,
Yeah.
and I know other people went through it too, where it's so hard when you lost someone during that time, you just you couldn't be there, and
Yeah.
it was so hard. I don't like my friends and I were all saying that like I get now why people who went through the First and Second World War, who went through those kinds of conflicts, like they don't want to see certain things, they can't watch certain things, they can't, or even through a good person, like there's certain things that people went through, they don't want to see it, they don't want to talk about it, they can't. And I'm like, I get it now, because I don't want to see anything about the pandemic ever again. Like I can't, you know what I mean? Like it's so hard to watch or engage with certain things, or even just really emotional scenes because of what that experience was like.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, and because of that, like Ashley, I actually really strongly want to like re-echo like what you said about the choice to kill Hopper and then bring him back. Like I feel very messy about that decision as a whole, because I mean, I wasn't happy that they killed him for sure, but because of largely, I mean, just in addition to the fact that like it put a lot on Joyce, but at the same time, I feel like by the decision to do that did affect everything moving forward, and that includes the reunion between Eleven and Hopper at the end of season 4. And I feel messy about that reunion as well because I I feel like it's very sweet, but that does not resonate with me in the way that like this sequence does, the end of season 3, which I was surprised by that. So but that's a different conversation. But yeah, the scene itself is really beautifully done, but yeah, I tend to skip it.
Yeah. So y'all ready to go to season 4?
Onwards.
Yep, go
Actually, a
ahead,
good
Jasmin.
segue for that before we get into Robin's topics, which is that I think one of the reasons they both resonate differently is because the end of season 3 with the letter is a much longer sequence. It's a much more of a character piece. It's much longer, like we were
Yeah.
talking about with the Robin and Steve scene from season 3, versus the end of season 4 was very quick. That's like we skipped 2 days, and then it's like da da da, and we're done. So it felt very abrupt and very jarring. So I don't think that ever could have resonated the same way or at the same level. And as much as I love season 4, I think it fell victim to A, the pandemic, which is outside of their control, but B, because of that, they had to cram in so much and so much got left on the cutting room floor and they had to make choices. And there was definitely stuff they could have sped up or cut in order to include more at the back end of that season and at the conclusion. And I mean, I think if they were going to redo it now, there's things they definitely do differently. But I know they were just doing the best they could with the circumstances they had, which were admittedly very challenging. So I think that's also part of why it resonates differently, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it for me is that the way that they handle it with him showing up, they treat it more like he's just been away.
Yeah.
It doesn't have the like earth-shattering shock of, I mean, Joyce says it, they buried him. They buried him. He was, and Elle does not have any, they do not indicate throughout, because you know, when I've gone back and rewatched parts of season 4, it's like I don't get any indication from anything that they're telling us within the text that he that she believes that he's still alive. They are treating it like she's grieving him. So to have him show up and her just be like, I've missed you. It just, I don't know. It didn't, that feels like almost icky to me. But then I've also talked to other people that have that have also lost specifically their father, and they said that that scene totally resonated for them. So everybody's different, but I found for me it, and I can totally acknowledge that part of that might be the conditions under which my father died that are different from other people. So but I've also talked to some other people who feel the same way I do. So it's just, I think it's one of those things where like loss and grief and all that can hit you very differently. But yeah, it's definitely something that like I think was difficult for them to tackle. And yeah, I do want to echo that. I do think they did the best they could.
Yeah, I agree. And I also think it's like you say, the way the grief manifests for different people differently. Like I agree. I think Joyce and Elle are very clearly grieving throughout that season. Right. We don't get an indication they think he's still out there. But when she was like, I never gave up hope, I've also talked to people, or like I'm into a lot of true crime, that kind of thing on podcasts where people talk about their experiences, and that for a lot of people out there, especially if they lose a loved one or a parent very young, they have this thing where like on one level they know that they're gone, but on the other hand, like there was a story I heard one time where someone's like, yeah, I would drive to the beach or drive to bodies of water and look for them because I could not accept that they were gone. That they go back and forth on that thing, that part of their brain just cannot accept the fact this person is gone, that they have to be out there somewhere. So I can also appreciate why people that would resonate with people, that duality of like you're grieving the person, you know they're gone, but also for some people it manifests as then you kind of go back and forth with they got to be out there somewhere. So again, I wish we'd had more time to kind of go through Elle's process on that or see it, because I could see if it spoke to that experience that real people do have of, on the one hand, they're gone, on the other hand, your brain can't accept it and you hold out hope that they have to be out there somewhere, that duality does exist for people in real life.
It would be interesting to compare screen time or compared to another scene that we talked about in this episode of Mike and Elle's reunion, because that feels like, I think, more what I was hoping for. Like it's different, but that feels like it's not that much more time, but like they did establish in season 2 that Mike absolutely was still holding out hope. But because we knew that Elle was still alive, but he was just hoping. So it would be interesting to compare the running time of those two sequences.
Yeah, for sure. Because I agree. I think Mike and Al's reunion at the end of season 2, and then in season 4 feels like they both feel earned, but it has greater impact because I think of the time they take and the way those sequences are shot and paced, versus I think Hopper and Al's reunion is so quick at the end. And I think also because like you see him coming to the house, I get that it's the shock value a little bit, but like that just brings us so many questions where it's like, okay, so that means he walked past everybody else, you know what I mean, in order to get into the house, and then they all came back, and then they have the thing, and I could see it being a where is she? She's in the house, but still we missed the shock value of everybody being like, what the heck, you're back, what, you were supposed to be dead. And then because a bunch of these characters are at the gym and the hospital, I hope we're going to see this. I'm hoping the cold open for season 5 brings us back to those 2 days, or brings us right to that moment, because as far as everybody else knows, Hopper is dead, and we don't even know if Mike knows Eddie's dead. Like, we don't see their physical reactions to that, and I feel like we should have, because that's important. They buried this person.
Anyway.
Anyway, on to our favorite moments of season 4.
Right.
Robin, do you want to start us off again?
Sure. So in my list here, I'm gonna actually switch what I had written, because the more I think about it, the more like, so originally I had the running up that hill sequence was my number 1 choice, because like duh. But I actually think that probably my favorite moment, the more I think about it, is actually the Welcome to Hellfire sequence, and really the whole Hellfire Club game. The more I think about it, I don't think it's like the same as the beginning D&D game in season 1, but it feels like it's kind of like picking up from the spirit of that. And to me, that sequence with Erica and Eddie, like that feels like, to me, Eddie's like actual introduction as a character. I'm not terribly fond of the scene where we actually meet him for the first time, but I love all the Hellfire Club stuff. Like the him and Erica facing off is like, yeah, I think that's probably, which is a weird pick, I know, but I think that's probably my favorite scene of season 4, which is, like I said, it's probably not common to say that, but just the way it's intercut with the basketball game, I love that we
love that the editing and the way it cuts back and forth, and
and it's the Sinclair siblings, like I love it. It's so great,
and the music choice there, yeah, it was so great.
Yeah, and I think too, precisely because season 3 kind of decided to take a different approach to D&D, it was nice to see them kind of come back to this sense of, no, we like D&D, we're going to treat it with dignity, we're going to treat it with integrity. So I really, really like that. And I thought, honestly, I thought Priya Ferguson had great chemistry with Joseph Quinn. Like they were a really interesting pair, and I'm like, I would have liked to have seen more of the two of them. And then yeah, like because season 4 is still so new, it was harder for me to pick some. So I mean, honestly, I'm kind of gonna go for the low-hanging fruit, like Eddie playing Metallica, and then while it's a little shorter, I do really like the piggyback from a pizza dough freezer moment. But
I love that. I love that. Her delivery, where Max is like, she's thinking like, are you real? Like, did she imagine her from what Mike had told her? And she's like, I piggyback from a pizza dough freezer. And Max is like, what? That was also the moment when she knew that Elle was real.
Yeah, it's like, oh yeah, that's 11, all right.
It's like, nope. And they said it completely straight. Like people commented how they released that part of the script online that Elle's original delivery was supposed to be indicating how weird that is. But I love that Millie Bobby Brown was like, Elle doesn't know this is weird. She doesn't know anything's weird unless you tell her.
Right.
So like she played it completely straight. Like I piggyback from a pizza dough freezer. Like that's a normal thing to say. And Max is like, what?
Right. Actually though, I mean, I will also extend that to Elle's whole like sort of surprise attack when she shows up in that space. I really do like that whole sequence a lot. And then like kind of the last one I have listed here is the conversation, not for the reason that some people do, but I really like the conversation between Steve and Eddie in the Upside Down. I mean, the truth is I don't want to get into the shipping conversation, but I kind of like a lot of the stuff that happens in the Upside Down between that group of characters. I mean, the stuff between Steve and Nancy, I'm still very conflicted about where I stand in their relationship, but it's handled so beautifully. I mean, Ashley and I talked about that when we talked about those episodes. But I like that conversation between Steve and Eddie purely because I like it's actually like a sort of like a stowaway Steve and Dustin thing, because I like the line about kid worships you, dude. Like that made me feel really, really like it made me so happy. Like, and so yeah, I like that scene a lot.
I love how authentic it is too. Like we were doing a series comparing the script to the final version, and that like they took over scripted and made it more colloquial, made it more like something a teenager would actually say. And so I love that it feels like it's very much a conversation between two dudes who they have such mutual respect for each other, but they don't really know how to express that because they speak such different languages. So like Eddie tries and Steve has no idea what he's talking about, but then they find common ground over Dustin, and then that morphs into like, hey, I appreciate you saving, like saving my life. I appreciate you saving my life. Here's a thing that could help you out with your relationship. Like I love that.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, it's just a great little moment in, again, it's another like it's a very action-packed sequence. Those moments, but I like that we had this little like quiet moment to take a breath. So, that's my list for season 4. I know that there are going to be more scenes that continue to mean more and more and more, but because it's still so new, it was harder to like actually pick individual sequences. I'll throw on. I will add, just spur of the moment here. I will say that I also I'm not a big fan of the Russia arc either, but I actually really do like Hopper's monologue as well.
Love that scene.
To Enzo, I do really like that.
Yeah, me too. And I like that one particularly. Like it's really hard to watch, but having watched like the TikTok like live that they did for like the premiere where they interviewed all the actors. Where David Harbour said that he's really excited for everyone to see the show because he'd sat with this one particular like speech, this one particular monologue for 3 years. It's really hard to watch, but I thought that was so well done and delivered. And and they said we were going to learn more about his past, and I'd kind of forgotten about that until that moment. And I was like, oh man, this explains so much. Like again, like his characterization, I agree, seems off in season 3, but once you learn that, you're like, yeah, this is an extreme overreaction, but it's an extreme overreaction for something very real that happened. Like something I really love that the series does is sometimes things seem like a massive overreaction, but then you learn stuff and you're like, not the right reaction to have, but I see why you did that if this very real thing happened to you. And I like that they treat that with the respect it deserves. It's not characters have extreme overreactions and they never explain why. It's they have an overreaction and you're like, oh, because this very real horrific thing happened to you, and that's causing you to have this bizarre out of place reaction during a time of peace that otherwise makes zero sense. So I really did love that they explored that more and came back to it.
So for my favorite scenes from season 4, it's a lot of them are similar to Robin's. I really like the D&D game in episode 1, the way they intercut that with the basketball game, and also because there's so much foreshadowing in the D&D game, and the fact that they're playing, literally with Vecna, and they roll an 11, and it's a miss, and all that. And I'm not saying that Eddie is Kaz, by the way, because he's not. I thought it was pretty obvious just from the D&D game alone that 11
11
would be
is.
Kaz. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm not even going to get started on that because I could, rant about that for
Yeah.
many, many minutes,
Yeah.
about how some people really choose to believe that Eddie's Kaz. He's not. But anyway, I really like that. Also, I like the run up that hill moment in episode 1, between when it transitions from 11 to Max. I
Me too.
like,
I love the
Yeah.
transitions in these seasons.
it's probably actually my favorite season, favorite scene from season 4, because of the way they did it, and I wasn't expecting that to happen, and it's just, um, I just love it so much, and it also ties into what Eleven said at the beginning of the episode in her letter to Mike, of like how funny time can be, like when things are going wrong, it seems like time slows down, and when they're fun and things are going great, time, speeds up and all that. So I thought that was, really good for them to literally have time sort of slow down in that moment for both Eleven and Max, and also because it kind of foreshadows, sort of what's to come for them later on in the season. Obviously the other run up that hill moment and from episode 4 is really good. I like the scene when Eleven gets her powers back. And then I liked all of the Vecna Mindscape scenes just because, that it's a wholly different, place than we've ever seen before in the show. I really like that. And then I liked Vecna's monologue in chapter 7. Those are probably my chief favorite scenes from season 4. I mean, obviously there's more, but those are just the ones that every time I go back and rewatch this season, those are just always ones that really hook me every time.
Actually, can I add one? I can't believe I forgot this.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
I can't believe I forgot this. So I don't know how it happened, but I will definitely add like very high on my list of season 4 favorite scenes, which probably no one believes me since I forgot it, but the when the throwing, like the throwing of the Molotov cocktails and then Nancy shooting Vecna.
Oh,
That
such a good
whole
scene.
montage, yeah, because and I'm like, how did I forget that? Because I've literally been listening to
It's
it's
such a
not the
long season, though. I mean, in terms of
yes, it is.
it's massive.
Yeah, but I've been listening to a cover of the remix of the song that they use. It's not the actual one from the show because it's not on Spotify, but a cover of it. So I listened to that. That's like on one of my playlists that I have on repeat right now. So yeah, because it's that moment, and I love that sequence because I mean it was funny because a couple of the co-hosts that are over that join me on Coffee Contemplation, they agreed with me that like when Nancy takes that final shot, it's like that's for Barb.
Yeah,
At least that's how it strikes us.
yeah,
So
100%.
I love it. I love that sequence. It's so good. And I love
yeah,
the multi-tiered attack. It's just great. A really great
When
sequence.
the
I love
light
it.
catches her eyes,
Yeah,
like in
yeah,
Harry's comment interviews, but the shot you have where it catches and
Mm-hmm.
you see the reflection, like it's Sigourney Weaver and Alien. It's epic. It's so great. It's such a
yeah.
great shot.
It's really good too. And just to add to that, it's too bad that it took place like 10 years before the Scream franchise came out, because Nancy could have watched Scream and learned, hey, you gotta go for the head. So it's very unfortunate that she wasn't able to see Sidney Prescott put it throw a TV down on someone's head, and then aim for the head. That's all I saw there.
Steve's got an axe right there and everything.
I know. I know. Jasmine, what about you?
You guys have already mentioned a bunch of ones I think that top everybody's list, the running up that hill sequence, the one, like the one in Max the Mindscape, but also the transition. You guys have mentioned a lot of my favorite moments, so I'm going to like the D&D basketball game. There's so many great moments. So I'm gonna focus on some other ones that I really liked because you guys have covered a lot of the ones I really do love. Just to, give us some variety. One of my favorite character scenes in all of season 4 is the scenes that we get early on in episode 1, or chapter 1 rather, with Steve and Robin. So the scene of them in the car where they're talking about his dating life and Vicky and the whole booby sequence. I love their banter. I love, the way it establishes where these characters are at. Like you said, so quickly in a single scene, we know exactly where those characters are at. Then the follow-up sequence where they're together at family video and they're talking about, how they could just combine and everything would be great. And I love their camaraderie. I love their friendship. And you get, it feels like a real conversation you would have, that kind of thing where your friend's like, no, I don't. Yes, you do. Like that whole, and it felt like a kind of a callback to season 3 when he was like, no, I'm not in love with Nancy. And the whole thing. And it goes back like, no, I'm not. No, it's not about Vicky. It's like, but like that thing you have with your friend, like people have pointed that and said that that's like a retcon or inconsistency. I'm like, no, it's not. Have you never been friends with somebody? Like, you know what I mean? People do that all the time where you're like, no, I don't. And your friend's like, okay, alrighty there, bud. Like, happens all the time. So I love that. And then as people who listen to ham radio will know, I'm a big Steve and Nancy fan. I was not expecting that to make a comeback, but it took me, I will say, it took me until I'd say probably like 3/4 of the way through the season to be like, oh, that's where we're going. Okay, I'm into this. Because when they were first talking about, Dustin was making comments and stuff, I was like, he's not in there. Like, what? Like, no. And then we got to the part where with the Demobats and then Skull Rock, and I was like, oh, we're going here. Oh, okay, yeah, now I'm into it. Okay. So I love the scene I love the scene with the Demobats. Then Steve is absolutely like he's so hot in that scene. It's so great. It's such a wonderful sequence. And then the whole thing at Skull Rock, like the chemistry is off the charts. I also love the dynamics between the characters, where Eddie goes from being this very like cocky, confident guy when they're like, oh yeah, by the way, if you step on the vines, it's a hive mind. What? You're stepping on Vecna, and he's like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. I love how Steve and Nancy kind of, you see them kind of for them around, they really team up, and they're very much a solid team throughout the rest of the season. And they're like on the same, you can tell the first time since Barb disappeared and died, they're on the same page, they're working as a team really well. I love that. I love that they leaned into, because some of that wasn't in the original script. I love that they leaned into that, because I think Joe Keery and Tally Dyer have really fantastic chemistry, and they work really well off each other as actors.
They really
So I love,
do.
yeah. So I love that
Yeah.
they played off of that, and again, that's a great example of when you read the script for that episode with the Massacre at Hawkins Lab, you like all 4 characters, Steve, Nancy, Robin, Eddie, in the original version kind of play off each other more. And I like that got changed, because that dynamic I don't think would have worked in the end. The fact that Steve and Nancy, they've both 2 characters who have experienced this kind of thing before, and they're both leaders. They both take charge personalities, work really well as a team. But Robin and Eddie, like Eddie has no idea what the hell's going on. And Robin is freaked out. She's nervous. She's clumsy. Like she's not, neither of them they're not in a place to do that. And so to me, that dynamic, the way it was scripted, I was like, that doesn't work, because then you have 4 people taking equal roles when reality, 2 people are on a different footing than the other 2 people. So I love that they clearly saw that when they went to film and adjusted for it, because the dynamic we see on screen makes so much more sense for those characters and works so much better. It also lends itself to more, not only dramatic moments, but more comedy moments, like comedy moments that land better.
I love
So
I
yeah.
love the speaking of comedy moments, I do love the like once the ground shakes and then Eddie's so guns seem like a pretty good idea to me.
Yeah. Love that.
Yeah, that's
I
great.
absolutely love that. And then I love the scenes at the Creel house. Those are super interesting. And speaking of comedy, like a soft moment I love is when Nancy's getting the cobwebs out of Steve's hair, and he gets all flustered, he's tripping over his words, and he's like, Sherlock Holmes, and she's like, what? Robin is also like, they're talking about the babies, and they're like, what is wrong with you? This girl's got issues.
I really struggle with that scene because I really struggle with like secondhand embarrassment, and I just was like, the first time watching it with a big group of friends, I was like, I can't.
Yeah.
So I don't think I've actually watched that scene all the way through because I'm just like, nope, I can't handle it. I can't handle the embarrassment. Nope.
No. I also love, like, again, comedy moments when he's like, don't go in there. Like, she's so confused and like, oh, I love those scenes. And I love the whole like follow through plot of Robin being like, platonic with a capital P. And like her little hand motion, like in the little sing song voice. I just love that. And I love that we see Steve. Like with the bathroom scene. I love that we see Steve kind of have those moments where he kind of trips over himself, where he's about to say something, and he's like, "Oh shoot," because that feels very genuine to me, especially during this time period where I think we all have moments where we go to say something, and then we're like, "Oh shoot, that's not public information." Shoot. So I love that they show Steve doing that because that feels very natural and real to me. Where you're going to say something, and you're like, "Oh man, hang on a second," and him kind of struggle to try to explain why he's not dating Robin because he realizes, "Oh no, I'm giving the impression that like I'm being vain or something, and that I don't think she's pretty or smart, like that I don't think she's good enough." And then he's like, "No, I got a course corrected, but I don't want people to think I'm dating her." Like I love that kind of follow through. I love that in the Creel House, and then like the fact they follow through with that. I love it. That felt very genuine to me. So I really love that. And some other things I really love is I'm a big Dropper fan. So their reunion where they meet up at the prison and he can't quite believe that she's really there. And then the script they were just supposed to embrace, but that got changed because he's like, yeah, I don't think he believes she's really here. And the fact that Enzo was behind them and he looks like he's praying. I love that sequence. And then of course the church scene, like as a big Dropper fan, I was like, yes, finally. Never thought we'd get there. Super loved that. And then we've talked about Alan Hopper's reunion, but that is a scene I really do, as short as it was, I really do love from season 4. And I have to say my favorite plots this season were the Hawkins plot generally, but specifically the scenes that take place at the Creel House and at Family Video, not just with Robin and Steve, but also with Dustin and Max as well.
Awesome. So now that we've given you our favorite scenes from the show, we're gonna switch gears and give you our least favorite moments of the show, which I'll tell you, there's actually fewer. I actually have fewer of these, believe it or not, than favorite scenes. So, Robin, would you like to start us off this last category?
Sure. So I'm probably gonna get controversial with this, but so my least favorite scene with a bullet, it's the scene that for me it's probably the lowest point in the entire series for me, and it was the scene that occurred that I seriously considered walking away from the show in its entirety. And so that is the conversation, the fight between Mike and Will in chapter 3, The Case of the Missing Lifeguard. I go on extensively about that in my podcast, but what I'll say here is that for me, that is a scene that is actively harmful beyond the confines of the show. So I am a queer person. I am a romantic asexual, so I'm aroace. What that means is that I don't experience attraction, either intimate attraction or romantic attraction. It's very rare for me. So not knowing that that's what I was for most of my life, there's a lot about Will's experience that while I'm not gay, I do identify in a lot of ways with what Will goes through. I have been in Will's position in that moment. I have had people say things like that to me. Thankfully, never somebody I'm as close to, in, in terms of like never a best friend. So certainly never a family member, but a lot, like from coworkers and from not super close friends on and off throughout my whole life. And what that ends up equating to is there is something wrong with you. And I can guarantee you that that is something that a lot of people in like fairly like I feel like that's a fairly common queer experience. So being in that position and watching the way that scene plays out, for me, that scene is very harmful because it's insidiously portraying it that Mike is right, that we are supposed to side with Mike, in addition to the fact that that scene plays out and he never apologizes to Will on screen. He never says there's nothing wrong with you. There's no version of that in the show that follows that scene. The closest we get is Mike shouting it at, through the buyer's door, but Will's not there. So as far as we know, those words have never been said to Will and from Mike. And the way that their relationship plays out after that, we just kind of forget that that happened. And to me, that's the part that makes that scene harmful, because that is the kind of insidious thing that you see a lot. And I don't understand how that scene can live in the series while you have all of the really wonderful representation with Robin. I just, they feel so at odds with each other. And like I said when we recorded the episode, it feels like, because at the time we had not, that was before they had confirmed canonically that Will was gay. That was way before Noah Schnapp had come out. So it was all still a lot of like, it was a lot of gray area. So I don't know if that was all way too personal, but I mean, as far as like least favorite moments, that's the one. That was the one that actually hurt me in my day-to-day life, because I know that that scene gives a certain sense of permission for people to treat queer people in the way that they do. And it doesn't seem as harmful as like some other things, but it's like that's the kind of thing that like moments like that live with you for the rest of your life. And I guarantee you that, if we were talking about a real experience, that scene that interchange would stay with Will for the rest of his life. So I just that one really hurts. Aside from that one, I tend to not like the deaths. The only one that, the ones that feel the most hurtful are Bob, Eddie, and Barb. I don't particularly care for Billy's death, in the sense that it felt a little bit like a waste. I think they all feel like wastes, but I don't think that there's, mostly those are just the fact that I just don't enjoy them. I just don't enjoy watching them. And then we talked about Hopper's letter and how I skipped that. But the only other, it's kind of actually more of a plot line, kind of what you were getting at, Jasmin, like the whole photos in the woods thing in season 1. I really have to just kind of pretend that just doesn't happen the way that it does, because it doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. I've broken it down multiple times in multiple places, but the fact that like he would have had to have sat there doing absolutely nothing for a really long stretch of time to make that sequence work. It just doesn't make sense. And I mean, and then follow up in the parking lot, the way that scene is framed to make Jonathan look like he's being bullied and to make Steve look like a jerk. And that just, the way that a lot of that's handled just continues to not sit terribly, terribly well, especially considering where those characters grow and go and evolve after that. So yeah, those favorite moments. Sorry to get kind of heavy with that, but yeah.
And man, we're talking about least favorite things. I mean, it's gonna, I think by its nature, get heavy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I hadn't thought about that scene with Will in a while, so I totally hear what you're saying there. I mean, I'm not a queer person myself, but most of my friends are queer, so I totally get where you're coming from there, that like, yes, sometimes creators, when they create something, they're trying to reflect a real experience, but sometimes by including that can cause harm in the real world. So I totally get what you're saying there. And I think because of the way Mike and Will's relationship plays out in season 4, not only do we not get it addressed, but you're like, you walk into the season being like, God damn it, Mike. So I'm really hoping we're going to come back to that season 5. But even so, like I've seen a lot of people make the comment that for Noah Schnapp, but I'd love to hear if he's comfortable. I'd love to hear him talk about this when the show wraps. I'd love to hear him talk about this, his own experience. Because I mean, I think we all have our own experience of what we're watching, but I've heard a lot of people talk about the fact that, like that kid showed up to work every day, and we don't know how it's different for everybody, right? Like we don't know how old he was when he realized that he was gay, right? Yeah. So we don't know how far back that went. Some people know their whole lives, some people, you know what I mean? Like it's different for everybody, but the fact that he showed up to set every day and dealt with that. And of course, none of that was intentional. Had they known, I'm sure they would have done that differently. You would never want to inflict that on an actor.
And that, but right there, that's kind of the problem. Is like it's like, yeah. But this is gonna reach actual queer people. Now, it's very possible. I mean, to kind of cover all my bases here, it's entirely possible that for, I certainly do not speak for the entire queer community, and there may be lots of people that read that scene and say that is absolutely accurate. I love that scene. That scene does not hurt me in the way that it does. That it does for me speaking. So I can't say that that's like a ubiquitous thing, but I agree. I would absolutely love to hear, what was it like to film that scene multiple times for all of the takes that you needed for all of the coverage? Like, what was that like? Because for him, it might have felt perfectly accurate, perfectly on point, but it's also like, that experience could have also ended up being formative for him in a way that he wasn't even fully aware of at the time. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to hear him talk about it if he's comfortable someday. And I'm with you there. I really hope we're going to come back to that because it's just, I think there's a line there. And again, it's different for everybody, but between representing something that is real, but also are you causing harm by showing that,
Mm-hmm. Well, like I said, it's the way that it's framed, like, I'm not trying to be a jerk, but I'm right. The scene is framed that Mike is the one who's right. And part of that is because the context of that moment is actually like, they aren't communicating well. And I get that that's part of the point. I get that's kind of what they're trying to play with. But I feel like the characterization there is really off. It just, the whole construction of the early half of that season. Now, I will add though that the end of that episode is what got me to stick around, because I was ready to tap out after that. And then what follows that is the bit between Elle, Max, and Billy, and then the ending of that episode is pretty top notch, and then that's followed by the sauna test. So that was what got me to stick around. But yeah, it's a really low point, and I don't even know if I need them to address it. It's just kind of like, at this point I would be perfectly fine if they just kind of continue to portray Mike in a way that feels more like the kid we got to know in seasons 1 and 2. It just felt like season 3 took this hard left turn, and it kind of hit bottom right there for me personally.
I can definitely see that, and especially because they touch on this, well, not to touch on it, but I think it's very much implied and understood in season 4 that Will and Elle have a very special bond, and I'm sorry we didn't get to see more of that, but I think we will in season 5, because they're going to be presumably like sharing a bedroom. Like we know they're sharing a tiny cast cabin, but I think something I'd love to see explored in season 5, and I kind of go along with that, is if Elle knew the way that Mike was treating Will, she would be very upset. I think she would dump his ass, because they clearly have a very special bond, and I don't think Elle would like that at all. So the fact that they took kind of a hard left turn there is like, okay, well, he's prioritizing his relationship with Elle, but Elle obviously doesn't know that the way he's treating Mike the way Mike is treating Will is suffering kind of because of that. She would not be happy about that at all. So that's something that also doesn't sit well with me, that like that's his justification. But if Elle knew that, she'd be extremely like not okay with that at all. So I'm with you on that one, and I'm also with you on about the photos. Like, no, it does not make sense, but like again, the fact that like Steve is trained to be the bad guy. I mean, the fact that all he did was break his camera and call him on it. I mean, it's pretty tame considering he should have like slashed that guy's tires, gone to the police, pressed charges. I mean, Steve's not it's framed that way, but Steve's not the bad guy there. Jonathan is like, as he says to Jonathan, what you did is illegal. Like, he's committed several crimes there. And like, the fact that we get to season 4 and then like we see that Jonathan's apparently point of view on that was, I got away with multiple crimes. I think I'll commit more crimes against the same people I was already committing crimes against 4 years ago. Like, what? Yeah. And the fact that like that Nancy, they play it like Nancy has to like pretend like she's into it in order to get what she needs for Jonathan to find Barb, who she still thinks alive. Like, that's horrible. The fact that Jonathan basically like faces no consequences and gets rewarded, and now his life is falling apart in season 4, but we learn it's all his own damn fault. Like, he's not actually facing consequences, and he's off on this woe is me train. Like, I'm just, what? Like, it's just like,
I mean, the only sort of brownie point that they get in that storyline for me is that Jonathan does cop to it. I mean, way too late, but he does at least say, I shouldn't have done that. And he is working up to an apology when Nancy interrupts him in the dark room. So they get
yeah,
it
but he
very,
says
very...
but, and then he talks about like how basically he did it for the aesthetics. To me, I'm like, that's not really a real apology to me.
Yeah,
because I'm like,
it's not. Yeah.
like, there's a line I love from Grey's Anatomy, but it's like, I'm sorry, but apologies don't end with the word but. Like, it's not
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but it's I'm sorry. Or that thing where like, oh yeah, I want to apologize. That's not an apology. We're not writing an email. Like, the
Yeah.
phrase is I'm sorry. Anything else is not legitimate, at least to me. Like,
yeah.
So yeah, I 100% agree on that one. I think too, I've really soured and hardened on that whole plot. I'm on a Discord server that's for like Stancy shippers, and I've learned a lot about like other people's perspectives and people who have experienced sexual assault and how they feel about that plot. And so that's been really eye-opening for me. I never really thought that hard about it. Like, obviously I was like, that's messed up, but I never thought that hard about it until season 4, at which point that moment right at the end there when Nancy gives him an out twice and he chooses to lie and continue intentionally hurting her, or when he admits to Argyle that he knows what he's doing is hurting her and he's doing it anyway. I had this moment as a viewer where I'm like, oh my God, it was always an act. Like, his whole thing in season 1 is supposed to be like, he's a socially awkward kid and he doesn't understand that what he's doing is wrong. But like, that was the moment for me where I was like, oh my God, it was always an act. Because you're making the active choice to hurt these people, you're covering it up, you're lying about it. You don't lie or cover if you actually don't think what you're doing is wrong, or you don't know that's not acceptable. Like, I had this moment where I was like, oh my God, it was always an act. Because you don't just randomly get that level of awareness while high 4 years later. Like, I just had this moment and I was like, oh my God. So that's really changed my perspective and hardened me on it, I think.
I don't know if I totally agree with that. I think, if anything, that feels more like not a retcon exactly, but that just feels like I feel like they kind of fumbled the ball with Jonathan's character in season 4, and that just feels like an inconsistency to me. But and that doesn't have anything to do with like I'm not really on either ship necessarily, but like I kind of feel like they did with Jonathan in some ways what they did with Hopper in season 3, maybe not quite to the same extent, but I mean, I think it's a more generous read, certainly, to kind of look at that more like, because I didn't buy any of the stuff with Jonathan, to be frank. Like, I kind of, but I feel like they've lost a sense of what they want to do with him, but that's a bigger conversation. But yeah, it's not a good look. No matter how you look at it, it's not a good one. It's not a good look.
No, and I agree. I think that I mean, lots of people have commented on this, but that Jonathan was supposed to be kind of, I think, was originally planned to be kind of the heartthrob out of the teens. Him and Nancy were supposed to have this storyline. And the minute Joe Keery was cast as Steve, and I realized how much more nuance he could bring to that role, Jonathan basically lost his purpose as a character, and they never really got it back. So it's just kind of steadily declined because I don't think they know what to do with him. That's part of a bigger conversation, but I agree with you on that point for sure.
Yeah.
But getting back to season 4, or I guess just our least favorite, not getting back to season 4. What am I saying? Our least favorite scene/moments. The other thing about season 1 that doesn't work for me is the bullies at the quarry. And I've said this from the beginning, but the bullies in the show don't feel realistic to me. Their behavior, the stakes, the fact that they pull that, and then that one kid is so dumb and has the audacity to go to his mom instead of like making up some lie about how he fell. He tells them that she takes him down to the station. The fact that they literally like they almost, like if Elle hadn't been there and she didn't have superpowers, they would have died. And those kids would have gone down for murder. Like that just did not, even at the time, just didn't feel realistic to me. And it still doesn't. Like I get that's a great moment for Mike, but I'm like, and 11 gets to show off her powers, but it didn't feel realistic to me. And I know that is a personal reason. The fact like the bullying I experienced growing up was much more of the subtle, exclusionary, or you know what I mean. Like it was more subtle.
Mm-hmm.
I've personally never witnessed the kind of bullying you see on TV. I know other people have had that experience. I'm not trying to invalidate that at all. It just for me that's bullying has always been more nefarious and insidious than this outright type of violence you tend to see. And I get that it's easier to portray that and show it physically than it is to show, because it takes a lot of time to show the kind of innocuous stuff. But that to me just never worked. And I have the same issue with the Angela and the boys in season 4. Again, that didn't feel realistic to me. That like their behavior, I'm like, I can buy the Demogorgon, I can't buy these bullies at school. So I felt that way the whole time. And then for season 2, the whole conversation at Murray's where Jonathan and Nancy wind up there, like I didn't have a super big problem about it the first time through, but again, like having rewatched and talked to other people about it, like looking back on it, it does kind of give me the ick, just because like, well, I don't think Murray's trying to cause any harm. This is like a middle-aged guy who lives in a bunker encouraging 2 teenagers to get drunk and have sex at his place. Like it just does not, on rewatch, it just doesn't sit particularly well with me. It kind of gives me the ick.
Yeah, it's skewing the characters a little older than they're actually supposed to be.
Yeah, and like the whole, I think this is, again, after the way Jonathan behaved before, it really made me as a viewer re-examine his behavior in past seasons. And I know for a lot of people I've spoken to who like unprovoked have said that to me. And that it really put the rest of his behavior in a new light. And it made me realize, I'm like, well, throughout the season, even when Nancy isn't making like the most moral decision or what you would think of as the right decision, maybe you at least see where she's coming from, because this is someone who is grieving the loss of her best friend and she can't talk to anybody about it. She doesn't feel like she can talk to Steve. She can't tell anybody else. She has to pretend like Barb's out there somewhere. So it's clearly eating away at her. So it's like, even when she doesn't make the right call, you see it's coming from a place of grief. But I realized that Jonathan, we don't really get his perspective. We don't get his justification for the whole camera incident. We don't really get and then look into his mind as to why he thinks it's okay to cheat with somebody else's girlfriend and then ignore that person for the rest of the semester and continue to be a dick anytime that guy's name comes up. Especially when Steve is so nice towards him. He shows up to apologize, saves his life, nothing bad to say about the guy. Like, I realize we don't really get his perspective. So I'm like, wow, Jonathan comes off as a real dick once you realize that. Like, he's just out there doing things, doesn't care who he hurts. Like, what the heck? So that, upon reflection, has not sat particularly well with me either. And then he turns around and again doesn't support Nancy with the misogyny she's dealing with at work. Like it forced me to re-examine his behavior, and I was like, wow, he comes off as a real dick here, because we don't really get Jonathan's perspective. We don't really see where he's coming from. At least I don't clearly see what his motivations are or his perspective in the way we see Nancy's. So that just doesn't sit particularly well with me anymore. And then in season 2, something I didn't like particularly about that season, even though I do love the season as a whole, is the fact that Mike is a dick to Max the whole time. Even though, like, we obviously he's missing Elle, but like he's just a jerk for her for really no reason. So I'm like, well, that's not super great. And then we've talked about this a lot, but in season 3, the Russia plot, like the Russians just their behavior just doesn't make any sense. Like they're smart enough to build an underground lab under the mall, but so dumb that they think kids in little sailor costumes are spies and not just employees of the ice cream parlor that stumbled into the lab they literally built under the mall. They're convinced they're working for somebody, even under like their behavior just doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't make any sense at all.
It's very cartoonish.
Yeah, it's very, and
cartoonish.
I was not into that at all. So like again, I like the dynamics of the other characters around that plot, but that plot itself, I'm like, really? Like, use your like it'd be one thing if they were dressed in other clothing, maybe, but like they're very clearly in their work uniforms. These are children. Like and Dustin and Erica are quite young. Like these are children. Like what? And then we've talked about this, but Hopper's behavior is really out there and in season 3, which I didn't love. Like there were moments I liked, but the fact that he's freaking out because Ellen Mike are making out in her room, which is pretty normal for that age. I mean, he goes to Joyce for advice and she's outright like, well, if it's not going beyond kissing, I don't think there's an issue here. He ignores her advice. The fact that he like makes Mike think that his grandmother is sick and locks him in the car and then like screams at him. And again, all this guy is doing is making out with his girlfriend and being kind of cocky about it. Like he's not committing war crimes. Like that doesn't, and that's something else I think you see this as far back as season 1, but there are definitely times where characters, especially Mike and Nancy, where they're just like making out, he's just making out with his girlfriend, and Nancy's just making out and having sex with her boyfriend. Totally normal things to be doing, and other characters act like they're committing felony war crimes. Like, I know it's not a thing, but like they act like they're committing some sort of massive crime, and I'm like, but they're not. That's weird. So that's never sat particularly well with me. And then my final point would just be for season 4 that I feel like, in addition to the Angela and the bullies plot being unrealistic, the California plot really drags. There are moments about it I loved, and the rest of the time they're just riding around in the van, and I'm like, you could have cut half of this and then made the end of it longer. Similarly, you could have condensed the Russia plot. I didn't really like the Russia plot. You could have condensed that and given us those 2 days at the end, or a longer set of reunion scenes, or realization scenes at the end. So yeah, those are say my least kind of favorite scenes and moments and plots from throughout the show. Ashley, what were some of yours?
Yeah, so surprisingly, I only have like 2 least favorite scenes in the entire series because these 2 scenes are just moments that really make me cringe, and rarely does that ever really happen in this show that I go, wow, that was and from a writing perspective or a production perspective, I just go, I wish they hadn't have done it in that way. And both of these scenes come from season 4, from the same character, and that is Will Byers. And it's not any scenes that you're probably thinking of, but one is, I believe it's in episode 5 when Mike and Will and Jonathan and Argyle are, in the back of the van with the map, and they're, need to go find a computer hacker, and the only one they know lives in Utah. And Argyle's like, what are you talking about? And Will's like, and then he starts singing the Never Ending Story song, and I'm like, cringe. Every time I rewatch, I hate it because I'm like, no one asked you to sing. Please don't sing it like that. It's, I don't like that whatsoever. I mean, I know it's supposed to be like comedic relief, but like you don't have to sing it. Like we already know, what the song is. Like please don't sing that. And then the second one comes towards the end of episode 8, when 11, finally gets back in the van, and she's like, um, she tells Mike, we need to get to Hawkins now, and then she says, they're in danger, they're in trouble, and Will, bless his little heart, says, who 11, who's in danger, and I really hope that was improv and not written in the script, because if it was, like, that's why will it'd be one thing if she hadn't just said we need to get back to Hawkins. Like, well, who else would she be talking about? And you guys already know that something bad's going on in Hawkins, because just a few episodes ago, the federal agents showed up to your house and told you that. And I absolutely hate that moment, because in that moment, because it's such a dramatic thing. All you really need Will to do is just be quiet like everybody else, and just have that dramatic pause, and then cut to the Hawkins crew in the RV rolling up to the Creel house. And those are probably my least favorite scenes, just because of the way they're shot.
It's funny. I don't even remember him singing the Neverending Story.
Oh,
I've like
lucky
blocked it, I
you.
guess.
Lucky
I like that
you.
moment actually. I actually like the never. I don't actually remember the scene you're talking about where she's like they're in danger. I actually don't remember that one.
I
I
actually don't remember
believe
that one
you.
either.
No, but it didn't stand out for us to like.
Yeah. I thought you were gonna say you didn't like the scene with the painting, and I was gonna be like, I actually do like that scene.
Oh, I
It's
like it too.
yeah, it's messy, it's complicated, but ultimately I like that scene a lot. So yeah, I don't
Me
remember
too. Me
either of
too.
those scenes. Yeah, that's funny. But yeesh. Well, I guess I'll experience them on the rewatch. For the- but
Yeah.
yeesh,
Let us
yikes.
know.
Yeah, will do.
So, before we end today's episode, Robin, would you like to tell everyone where they can follow you on social media, and where they can listen to both of your podcasts?
Absolutely. So the both of the podcasts they're hosted by Anchor, so we're available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, most podcatchers, and our socials. Coffee and Contemplation is Coffee in Hawkins on TikTok, and Coffee and Contemplation Pod on Instagram. I know it's long. And then Classified, we are just Classified Podcast on TikTok and Instagram. And while I have the opportunity, I'm actually going to go ahead and throw out a shout out for Starwipe Films, which is probably really arbitrary, but that's something that it's the filmmaking team that I'm a part of, and we are Starwipe Films on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram, and we make movies every year. We make short films every year, and that's something that I've also been up to in the interim since like we've been on the hiatus for the podcast. So like we made we have this whole backlog of short films on YouTube, and that's they're like 6 minutes or less, so it's a lot. And because we do film races every year, which is make a movie in 72 or 48 hours. And most of them are sci-fi or fantasy in some capacity. And then something that I'm up to on a regular basis over there is we also do a filmmaking video series on film races, which is I edit those, but I also appear in them from time to time, and it's just a little bit of like a how to approach filmmaking from specifically within the confines of a film race and a film challenge, where it's you get your criteria, you write the script, you shoot the movie, you edit the movie, and turn it in like one weekend. And it's a great little, like, for anybody who might be listening who's interested in maybe trying to get into filmmaking, it's a really great way to try things out and to get started. With just a small team of people that you can usually get to join you without having to pay them. And by the end of the weekend, you have a movie or you're well on your way to it. So yeah, wanted to just take the opportunity to shout that out, Starwipe Films. And we'll be making another film this fall, probably. So yeah.
That's so
That's where
awesome.
I'm at most of the time.
Yeah, that's cool.
I have to say too, I'm a huge fan of the Coffee and Contemplation, like the audiograms you guys do on TikTok.
Oh, thank
You know,
you.
they're on Instagram as well. Like they are my favorite thing every time they pop up my feed. I'm so happy. They
Oh,
are
thank
my
you.
favorite thing. For those of you listening out there, if you're on TikTok or Instagram, like please follow them. They brighten up my day. I really love them. They're really well done. And I'm hugely into TikTok right now. So they're just some of my favorite things. So for all you listeners out there, please enjoy.
Thank you. That means a lot.
Yep, and Yep, you should definitely give Coffee Contemplation and Classified follow so you'll know when they have new episodes coming up. I always look, it's always a joy for me when I get a little notification from Spotify that Coffee Contemplation has put out a new episode because I'm like, yes, in-depth analysis, yay! And seriously, yeah, they like Jasmin mentioned their audiograms are super awesome. They also put them out there on Instagram as well. And yeah, it's always a joy to have Robin on the show. Hopefully you'll be back for more like when season 5 comes out. Certainly, we'd love to have you, or anytime in the interim if you ever want to come on. We'd love to have you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really is, it was so great to come back. Like it's been a long time since, I mean, I'm gearing up to do the recap episodes, but I haven't had the chance to just sit down and chat Stranger Things in a really long time. So this was awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Yep, anytime.
And that's our show. If you like what you heard today, be sure to subscribe and tell your friends. Our theme music is provided by Neon Knights, and our sound editing is provided by Ashton Cooper. Thank you for listening to this episode of Ham Radio, a Stranger Things podcast. Please join us next time, same dial, same time.
Over and out.